Cosmic events, the cosmic wars are centering on Earth. So we're in, I would say this, the most precipitous and perilous times that we've ever experienced on the Earth, nor would, as the prophet Daniel declared it. So I'm going to turn it over to Tom, then we'll go back and forth. And Tom, when you're done, or want any, break, just throw obviously Machu Picchu. Now, what's obvious about the Incan, Aztec, and Mayan civilizations, here's what the lying controllers of false history don't tell you, is none of those societies or those civilizations ever claimed to be the original builders. They actually are on record as claiming they were built by the giants that came from the east. So, we're dealing right off the bat. So right now I have film crews and pre-crews. When we get on to the whole history of the giants, it's a big deal, pun intended, because in the Bible, and this is something that's fascinating, when I set out to start researching fallen angels, having sex with women, producing the giants, which became the mighty men of old, the mighty men of renown, it's worldwide, Cliff. It's not just, quote, the Old Testament. It's in every single written and oral tradition of the ancients. Now, people have tried to question that, but I can say to them this: look, you can question all you want, and it's good you question, but when the identification of different pyramidal structures are coming out that transcend in size and are even bigger than the Pyramid of Giza, when you're dealing with giant stones that are even bigger than in Lebanon in Baalbek, which is called the stone of the pregnant woman, some of the stuff, and I heard your introduction, obviously, Russia has some of the biggest megaliths in the world that are bigger than anything else. So when we took our expedition, just a real quick story, we took it down to Peru. We had about 25 people with us, and we met with one of the most famous explorers in the world, Anselm P. Rambla. And what's fascinating is that in the area of Sacsayhuaman, it's considered the biggest stargate in the world. Now, you wouldn't know that, I wouldn't know that, unless somebody who's into that world knows that. And having said that, what was most fascinating, in all the world, you've probably had speakers on your show that have talked about the underground tunnel system, but there are tunnel systems all over the world, and in South America, they call that the Chincana. Well, the official position of the Catholic Church after the conquest by Pizarro and the different conquistadors was, well, there is no such thing as underground tunnels. Fortunately, that we had one of the world's leading, and I call him, by the way, he's a great-looking guy, Anselm P. Rambla, and he looks like, that guy, the ex-guy in the Dos Equis commercial that used to be the most interesting man in the world. I tell everybody, I actually met him. But he was the only guy ever allowed by the Peruvian government and initially by the Catholic Church to prove the existence of the tunnels that go from downtown Cusco, from a church called the Coricancha, all the way to Sacsayhuaman, and they were obviously made by someone other than the Inca. The Incan Empire was pretty much based where now the Coricancha is the Church of Santo Domingo. Actually, it's a convent of Santo Domingo. That's where that's located. So all over the world, what we're finding, and I do have film crews that literally fulfill that bill that go all over the world, and we're working on a couple things now, and I'll be blunt with everybody. We're not after the big bones and skeletons that the Smithsonian covers up. We're tracking live, multiple witnesses in the jungles of some of the world's most, I would say, off-limits places with I'm talking multiple testimonies and contemporary in the last several years. So, it's pretty interesting because the Smithsonian covers this stuff up. But getting back to the Incan Empire, the Incan Empire built itself upon the ruins of the megalithic structures from the past, and we call it Cyclopean architecture. Obviously, in Greek mythology, the Cyclops were the builders, if you will. They were literally called the belly hands. You've maybe heard that term, belly hands. Well, that was attributed to the Cyclops. So we've had teams.
Quickly, Steve. Steve, let me stop you. Let me go back a second. Are you saying that you're sending film crews to actually capture living giants?
Yes.
Is that what you meant? Okay, because I
yes,
heard
sir.
that you didn't say giants. So there's evidence of giants in the Amazon. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes, sir. There's evidence of giants in the jungles of Southeast Asia. There's giants in the hidden secret, if you will, civilizations in South America. And what's fascinating, and I'm not going to skip over this is important. In the U.S. Defense Department, the DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, wants the DNA of these entities. Because let me make this clear. I don't know, since I've never been on your show before, fallen angels are termed Nephilim. They're only used, that word is only used in Hebrew twice, in basically Genesis 6 and also Numbers 13, 32, 33. After that, the word Rephaim refers to all the different tribes of giants that Joshua and Caleb drove out of the promised land. Now, people can say, oh, that's just nonsense, that's just fantasy. But our film crews have had even found reference to the giants in Sardinia and outside the Straits of Gibraltar, where they've literally stated that they are fleeing from the presence of Joshua the usurper. So imagine this. Everybody puts into a human size and shape how these megaliths were built, but when you go to Sacsayhuaman or Ollantaytambo and see the original megalithic structures, like any place in the world, the fit is so tight, Cliff, you can't even put a razor blade through it. And that's been this statement. Well, how can people with obsidian, literally obsidian copper tools, fashion stones with right angles and geometrically aligned with the stars? And the whole field of archaeoastronomy is fascinating because there's no way to deal with the understanding of that unless someone literally from the heavens, and in this case I'm talking fallen angels, came to earth. Now, demons, D-E-M-O-N-S, you're seeing a lot of talk about demons and demon possession and everything else going on worldwide. I think even the Catholic Church. By the way, I'm not a Catholic, so I'm not bashing Catholics, but I just want to make it clear that even some of their lead exorcists are saying they could use another 100,000 exorcists right now. So that ought to tell you that there's a lot of problems, and it transcends the Catholic Church because, we're talking about demonic entities. And this gets really important because, again, at Sacsayhuaman, Ollantaytambo, and Machu Picchu, you have evidence, and it's covered up and it's covered over because the governments don't want you to know this. And the United States has bribed and basically, how do we say this, either bribed, murdered, or silenced anybody that want to bring this real information out because it's called core reality. So, that's what Genesis 6 films do, and I want to share this with you. People can go on, and they should go on, and they can download these, not download them, they can stream them off of Vimeo and look at this stuff because we've spent, close to 7 figures producing 3 of these DVDs, and they give people a true understanding of what's going on versus the, how should I say this, the covered up and cover over of history. So again, this is a whole different field, I would guess, than most of your speakers or most of the people that you've had on your show speak about.
Yeah, living giants is that's the new one for us here. Lots of bones, lots of references, lots of evidence of ancient giants, but if you have fresh footprints, now we're not talking Yetis or the Sasquatch, right? We're talking a different.
We're talking 12 to 14 footers, 6 fingers, 6 toes. One of the giants that was even cataloged with multiple witnesses in the Solomon Islands was capable of lifting a 6,000-pound D6 cat blade and hurling it. and in New Guinea, the records, and talking to helicopter pilots that do a lot of mining and exploration. You know, during an interesting thing during World War II, and for the record, these aren't Shrek-like guys that are just nice and are vegetarians. These are cannibals, okay? And during World War II, obviously with the Battle of Guadalcanal, there were all these references to, you know, the human remains being found, you know, the U.S. blamed the Japanese, and the Japanese blamed the U.S., but everybody forgot about this, that there were literal giants. And when you talk to the old-timers that are lucid, they have all their faculties, they tell you about this. Unfortunately, when you're dealing with native populations and some of the, and when I say remote, these are some of the most remote, yet to be discovered places in the world, you know, that you're talking about people that take it as a given, not, as something as sensational. So imagine the day when a 12 to 14-foot giant is filmed, it's not photoshopped. When you see the size, and, you know, I was the guy on talk radio, I don't know if people know this, I've been on talk radio for 25 years, that interviewed a pilot that flew a dead giant out of Afghanistan, out of Bagram, the Air Force Base there, and then L.A. Marzulli, who talks about the skulls and the DNA and stuff of the pretty much the cone heads, you know, that's what I call them. The elongated, and by the way, in my opinion, the elongated skulls of all South America and the different places in the world is not headboarding. That's a totally ridiculous, you know, I would say, it's just not, it's just crazy stuff. I live in Montana. We have the Flathead Indians, and when you cradle board someone, obviously part of their face gets pushed in, but I've never seen cone heads, even in the Flathead Indians, and that's how they got their name, or other civilizations. So this is a field getting ready to be blown open, and it's fast. It would be fast and furious. Once that knowledge is given, it does away with evolution, it does away with the anti-biblical stance, and then it brings into a whole realm of conversation aliens, i.e. fallen angels. Now, I have a different take than the people that believe that the aliens are benevolent and they created us. I used to tell the story, you tell me this, why do aliens then have to come and have sex with Earth women? What, because there's a sign out on Saturn's ring saying Earth women are easy? And I don't mean to be tacky, but, you know, the point being is that even the idea that when you're dealing with abductees, and by the way, I wrote a book called Aliens and Fallen Angels, The Sexual Corruption of the Human Race, in which I basically quoted, researched all the lead UFO researchers in the world, you know, all the ones that are just exemplary in their findings, from Hynek Blue Book, Steiger, you know, Whitley Strieber on Communion, even when he writes about it, he couldn't separate the alien phenomenon from the demonic, and those are his words, not mine. So we're dealing with something that basically is in the spiritual realm, and we're dealing with something that is in the spiritual realm that, in my opinion, is getting ready to embolden itself and embody itself in the physical realm.
Okay, let's get into this book, Unearthing the Lost World of the Cloud Eater. By the way, I want to mention that this book is co-written by Dr. Thomas Horn, and the interesting part of this book is this, for those of you listening. It's broken into two parts, pre-Adamic and post-Adamic, Adam. And I think I want to ask you, what did a pre-Adamic being look like? You call them angels that rule the planet. Obviously, if these angels had sex with women and created the Nephilim, which are the post-Adamic people, what did the pre look like? Were they super beings? Were they earthlings? Were they earthmen or non-earthmen?
No, they were non-earthmen. Adam, obviously, and you're talking about clay, you know, dust to dust. But when you're talking about a civilization of angels, you're talking about the Golden Age. And the Golden Age is that which, you know, a lot of the myths and legends refer to. It's a fascinating concept because we're talking about places and civilizations. The book of Jeremiah the prophet talks about God judging a world before there was any Adam, meaning any Adam and like Adam and Eve, and before there were any cities. So the idea is the Golden Age, and this is what even Solomon was referring to, you know, in the times of old, because we're dealing with a civilization that was so advanced, and I tell people, where does all the advanced knowledge come from? How come you can, and I'm going to throw stuff out, you can direct me any way you go, because I'm like a data dump, okay? I don't want to just overwhelm you, but the point is that when you go into the cave paintings of Altamira, Spain, and Lascaux, France, and you see these, basically inscriptions that have been hidden away for millennia, and then they find out they're star patterns, and then you find out that so many of the patterns can only be, how should I say, explained by a heavenly perspective, it gets pretty wild. So the Pre-Adamic Incursion is really something that very few people will deal with. The contemporary Christianity doesn't want to deal with it, number one, because they're afraid of it, and I'm a Christian, by the way, and I'm not afraid of it. And somebody said, well, you're a closed-minded Christian. I said, I guarantee you, after my 11 books, that most people would never use the word closed-minded. Now, again, what we're talking about is a time where even between the first verse of Genesis, first couple verses of Genesis, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. That words, and those words, tohu and bohu, and I'll do this really quick, only apply to something under judgment. So the civilization of angels, whether you want to call it Atlantis, Lemuria, Mu, Hyperborea, all of the different names, Shangri-La, Shambhala, the places of antiquity came under a judgment, and you can see that in the pyramids of Yanguni, underwater under Okinawa. And by the way, they just now found out that New Zealand is actually what we have as the North and South Island New Zealand really are a supercontinent formerly known as Zealandia. And so all of the stuff that's hidden, in my opinion, is coming forth. And that's where we're at right now. So the Angelic Civilization specifically was, I would say this, hundreds of thousands of years into the future from where we are now. But imagine that there was a time when God blocked their intermingling with humanity, obviously after the creation of Adam and Eve, and you had both giants before the flood of Noah and after the flood of Noah. That's what it means in Genesis 6:4, when it says there were giants in those days and after those days. But the giants of what I would call pre-Adamic time were much larger, and there are people that will, want to take in the idea of gravity. By the way, there was just a British, I think it was the Daily Mail 3 days ago, carried this story of what people who colonize Mars will look like, and because they claim gravity is 70% less, well, we'll be taller, we'll be giants. Now, are you personally a sci-fi movie fan?
Oh, of course, I love it. Can't get enough of it.
Yeah. Well, let me take you back to probably 57, 59. There was a Barry Sullivan movie called The Demon Planet. I think it was it was in color. And it was amazing because they go to Mars, they find a race of ancient giants, but the giants are dead, but their evil spirits enter the people, and the astronauts start, killing each other off. A marvelous presentation. By the way, I think it was the first use of latex in spacesuits to make them look, pretty sleek. And that's like, what is it, 63 years ago? So the thing that's becoming more in our face is the fact that now you've heard it all these years, How old are you, sir?
I'm in my 50s.
Okay, I'm 66, okay? And I went to film school, and so when you go to film school, you got to learn all the history of film, starting with, Birth of a Nation and, Good Night, all of the stuff that were the early attempts, silent movies and everything. So, but my specialty was sci-fi, okay? And so the thing that is interesting to me, I've seen it. Then the other thing, and then we'll go on, but this is kind of exciting. By the way, I enjoyed this interview. So you got to say, Steve, let's go here. I don't mean to run away with it, but I get excited about stuff.
I'll let you run a little bit because you're keeping on cue, but we got a lot to cover. But go ahead.
But the whole point is that when we're dealing with the movie The Demon Planet in 1957, 59, somewhere in there, the interesting part is why does Mars have giants? Why are the giants dead? And now why do we have astronauts being possessed by demons? And so what's very problematic is if you take even the Twilight Zone episode, To Serve Man, if most people remember that, one of the classic episodes.
That was the one I was thinking about, To Serve Man. Those guys are huge. I think the guy who plays Lurch, the guy who plays Lurch in Addams Family is the main guy. The main
Ted Cassidy, I think.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, huge dude.
And remember, To Serve Man was a recipe book.
Exactly.
In other words, how to cook and prepare them. And that was at the end. So here's the thing. We're at a time now where we're dealing with a world that's gone so transhumanist, and this goes right back to what we're talking about. By the way, the Cloud Eaters, we better define that book. The Cloud Eaters is what the Native Americans call the giants. And when we met with one of the elders of the Zunis, Cliff Mahooty, he talked about they now currently open up stargates in which they talk to the giants, and the giants tell them they're coming back. And I asked him to explain it. He said, imagine, and he knows what the Stargate movie is. He said, just imagine that. And the giants appear. And I asked a lot of the Native American elders, I said, why do you guys worship your ancestors and, consider these bones sacred when basically they ate you out of existence? The standard lie about the Anasazi. So the point is that, hey, I got news for you. If someone took my ancestors to lunch, I wouldn't be inviting them to lunch at my house,
Exactly. Hey, so let me just get clarification. You're saying that pre-flood, pre-deluge people, for the most part, were giants. Are you suggesting that, I heard you mention Atlantis and some other very ancient early civilizations. Yeah. So is that the reference that is that the biblical reference that they were giants, or
it's not the biblical reference. It doesn't talk about Atlantis, Hyperborea, etc. But the point is whether you believe King Solomon existed or not, history says he existed. And when you deal with somebody like Solomon, who, I guess he was wise enough, except when he started getting into the whole world of interpersonal relationships with having too many wives and concubines, that got him in trouble, okay? Maybe there's a lesson to that. But here, let me read this real quick, okay? Because it's out of Ecclesiastes. And it says this, the thing that had been is that which shall be, and that which is done is that which shall be done, and there is no new thing under the sun. Is there anything whereof it may be said, see, this is new, it has been already of old time, which was before us. There is no remembrance of former things, neither shall there be any remembrance of things that are come with those that there shall dwell after. And I'll paraphrase that. There was a time, and he's talking about something beyond his realm. Now remember, he's the smartest guy in the world, and the idea is he's talking about, so I want to make it very clear. What I'm talking about is prior to the creation of Adam and Eve, there was angelic civilizations. They were composed of giants. They genetically altered. Now, angels, I find no reference. Here's a good question. I find no reference of angels in the Golden Age. I find males, male angels. It's stated in so many legends and it's referred to in so many myths around the world that the angels started to create biological experiments. And this is where, when you get into the chimeras, half animal, half human, and if you will, all of the different legends, myths leading to half animal. Minotaurs and everything. That all is dealing, in my opinion, with the pre-Adamic race, and some of that thing was held over. And so, it's just like the great, and this is a good place to take your listeners. It's just like the Alexandrian library that was destroyed. You have so much. There were books, and by the way, there were actually, until the Smithsonian got involved. Maybe you want to go there at some point, but there were books that. Imagine a book, probably 4 feet tall to 6 feet tall, and about 3 to 4 feet wide. I mean, the giants had books too. First, these weren't illiterate Neanderthals going around, living in caves, running down mammoths. We're talking about technology. And I'll give you a good example. because I'm on talk radio a lot of people, and had my own show 3 hours a day, and boy, my suggestion is don't go there. But the point, it just wears you out. The point is that people would contact me from all over the world, military, intelligence. I even had the head of former head of the Indian Air Force contact me and send me pictures of the giants that are in certain areas. I mean, that's no exaggeration. The coffins are 18 feet long. So, you know, you can say, oh, this is just, but anyway, getting back to this, the military guys have all stated to me that, you know, they cover this stuff up because they don't want the truth known. And I believe God's, you know, basically provoking their consciences to tell people the truth. And again, it's the same with Mars, Moon having water now, secret bases. I'm in Montana, you know, Bozeman, Montana, so we have Montana State University here, and then 90 miles south, this is relevant, we have Yellowstone National Park. Well, Yellowstone National Park is absolutely the most important place in the world to understanding any type of interplanetary life forms, because in Yellowstone there are thermophile bacteria, thermal meaning obviously heat, and phile loving, heat-loving bacteria that change the course of humanity forever. People, I don't know if you get it, but people always say to me, oh, volcano, Yellowstone's going to blow, Yellowstone's going to blow. I said the greatest effect on humanity beyond blowing, which, by the way, I think is bogus and not even relevant. I've spent 40 years filming it, and people want to see the Yellowstone that really is. Most people are experts, never been there. On my website, stevequayle.com, and I want people to go there if you don't mind me telling them. On the right-hand corner is the most intensive, and it's 25 minutes, but you know, it's the most intensive overview of Yellowstone from the air and from the ground that's ever been undertaken, so people can have a handle on, you know, what's really going on in Yellowstone. But people come from all over the world, and one little bacteria basically that was found in Yellowstone changed the course of the world forever. It made genetic engineering more possible, CRISPR technology, gene editing, and what's fascinating is the whole world, and this will sound like it's a big term, but polymerase chain reaction, PCR, was from a very bright scientist who shared the Nobel Prize for it, Kary Mullis. And that's out of one hot spring. Who knows what's there? So you've got bacteria that will live up to 350 degrees in either a basic solution, in other words, any place on the pH scale, basic or acidic, they've got bacteria. And then the temperatures and the thermal, and for people that want to just get a quick glimpse of this, I'm, by the way, right now producing a movie on Yellowstone and how it affects the history of the world and the understanding. I don't have it titled yet, but it is the biggest movie ever made, not bragging, but the most intensive coverage of Yellowstone and its effect on the future and interplanetary study. I mean, it's never been done. So that's what's currently underway right now.
Let's talk about this great book, though. So you highlight the grid system that these ancient pre-Adamic people found. The Earth has its own electromagnetic system. And talk a little bit about the fact that most of the ancient pre-Diluvian cities, megaliths, and other standing stones of monolith size are built on top of this grid system. Why is that important?
Well, it's important for a lot of reasons. Number one, the Earth has its energy field. Most people are, they're called ley lines, L-E-Y lines, and they're areas where there are intersection waveforms of energy, both telluric coming from the ground and astronomical coming from above. And people don't recognize that the history of the Earth, even our axis tilt and the presence of a former, if you will, position in the solar system affects everything. So the ancients knew this. And by the way, it's my contention that the pyramids all over the world were designed to be able to allow transportation between points, which we would call stargates, angel gates. For those who are familiar with Jacob's ladder in the Old Testament, they're transfer points. That's where time and space are, how do I say this, manipulated, and every single place of consequence, megalithic or of religious significance is built on a ley line. Now that syncs up and links up with my basic, if you will, statements in most of my books. No one could have known that except those who understood it and built in order to incorporate it. I don't believe a paramecium had sex with a protozoan. Their offspring turned into be, some krill in the ocean. The krill then went on a good time and produced plankton, blah, blah, blah. Total nonsense, in my opinion. And I built, I think I'm up to 10 or 11 books after 45 years, and I'm now telling people, look, there's going to be a time where you're not going to be able to, how do I say this, stop your head from shaking because you're going to see just how big the lie was. William Casey, the former head of the CIA, made the statement, and I don't know if you're familiar with this, but he basically made the statement that they'll know their effectiveness is complete when everything the American people believe is a lie. Now, Barbara Henninger, who's a very, well-known lady, basically stated that in, 1981. So people said, oh, that's not real. Remember Jack Anderson, the investigative reporter?
Sure, well-known. LA Times.
Yeah, well,
right?
so here was Jack Anderson in 1981. This has to do everything what we're saying, okay? He said the triple assault on the public's right to know, trying to shut off all channels of information to the electorate, seeking criminal penalties against reporters whose stories might identify CIA operatives, and the third, which Anderson called the most troubling, spreading disinformation to news agencies. Well, guess who designed that whole program? So that's William Casey. We're talking about, 1990, we're talking about at least 30 years ago, 36 years ago, and spreading disinformation news agencies. Obviously, you're an alternate talk show host, and you're seeing that now the, what I call the demon rats in control who want to control all the freedom of press. Remember this, freedom of press to those means there is no other opinion but theirs. So we're at a fight for our lives and the truth.
Yeah. So much to cover in this book. I want to bring up something that you really highlight here, which is these pre-dynastic Egyptians really were not, they were a mix of very high-level intelligence and perhaps earth-based people, and they seem to be able to travel around the world. And there's evidence that I've read about that there's Egyptian settlements in the Grand Canyon, and you refer to it in your book as Opar, the second land of Egypt. Can you talk a little bit about that? And then before we leave that, I want you to describe what Nupar Pasha, the Prime Minister of Egypt, brought up, which I thought was fabulous, which is, and I'm just going to give it away right now.
Yeah, give it away.
That what he said was, those of you in charge in the United States, we want, and this is in the late 1800s, he said that he would like the Americans to give back the Egyptian artifacts that they had in their possession. And at that time, there were no known artifacts because Egypt was still in the Dark Ages. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, Egypt really was in the Dark Ages in 235 BC, okay? Ptolemy III was pharaoh, and he sent a captain named Captain Ra-Ta, and the Egyptians worship Ra, and his navigator, Maui, around the world searching for lands to claim for Egypt. And they went throughout the entire Pacific, went into Asia, went into the Solomon Islands, went into Peru, Chile, and they never returned. And interestingly enough, they had advanced mathematics, and they proved, this will be a point of contention, but they proved in 235 BC that the earth was round, and they did it by using mathematics that were, I would say this, placed in the Library of Alexandria. So we've got, in 235 BC, we've got these Egyptians. And by the way, they left their, if you will, fingerprints, signatures all through the Ring of Fire, interestingly enough. all over the place. Now, the Egyptians in the Grand Canyon, I'm actually doing a DVD on that right now. When I was in the Desert Southwest with Tom Horn and our mutual film crews, again, talking to Native American elders, they openly, the ones that are knowledgeable, and elders are elders, I don't mean guys who think they're elders, but the real ones, openly talk about that. The Apache, there's a whole lot of wannabes, but I'm talking about, we dealt with some of the real bees.
Exactly what you're talking about. They're everywhere.
Yeah, so the thing is that, the Kincaid expedition, now let me talk about Nubar Pasha. Until I started writing and looking at the research for this, I didn't know. He was a 3-time head of Egypt, okay? He was their, if you will, the equivalent of a king, only not a king in those days, prime minister. And at the same time, you're dealing with John Wesley Powell, who ran the Smithsonian, and Wesley Powell was saying openly there is no diffusionism, it's all isolationism. In other words, there was no advanced civilizations or anything. Well, that hypocritical SOB, sorry, but he was. He actually formed the Cosmos Club. Have you ever heard of that, Cliff? Cosmos, C-O-S-M-O-S? No. It's the most prestigious think tank in the world, long before the Rand Corporation. Look it up. Now, the Cosmos Club was, you were invited into it. So here, what you've got, notice this, you've got John Wesley Powell, head of the Smithsonian. You've got Nubar Pasha, who makes a request to the Smithsonian to destroy any of the Egyptian artifacts that they found, and or to return them, Well, fast forward, we just had a big conference in Branson. I think this is the first time I've ever released this. And I'm contacted by a gentleman who is related to one of the most famous geologists in the world, Dr. Pewe, P-E-W-E. He's the one that set up I think it's the Arizona State School of Geology. But what was curious about it is he was taken into to the Smithsonian, okay, and shown his relative's brain, and you can go look this up on, the Dr. Pewe, P-E-W-E with an accent grave or whatever they call it over the first E. And when Pewe was, when he died, he wanted his brain to float alongside or be preserved along with John Wesley Powell. Now, why this is critical, because a relative was taken down into one of the voluminous Smithsonian, and it's not under the Smithsonian as you know it. It's out of town, 45 minutes, into a vast, if you will, almost Raiders of the Lost Ark complex. 100-yard floors with 100-yard intersecting corridors off of it. Imagine like a giant space station underground. He was showing Egyptian artifacts from the Grand Canyon. He was showing Egyptian mummies from the Grand Canyon. He was showing Egyptian giants and others 12 feet tall, the bones of them. And the guy said, we even got them up to 20 feet. Now, I checked this guy out. He's as legit as they come. I won't even go in any more information than just to say this. Under no circumstance was any part of his story in question. He was who he said he was. His relationship to Pewe was what he said it was. And the idea of somebody taking Wesley Powell's brain and putting it in some form of formaldehyde or whatever they're using to preserve it. Here's what he also said, and this is and to my knowledge, your show is the first time I'm talking about what I'm going to tell you right now. And that's, thank you for the opportunity. He said the artifacts that are, let's just say this, they don't want people to see, they're in giant vaults on ball bearings so they can move them around. Let's say you and I were privileged to go and we say, hey, we're on corridor C, unit 5G. Well, they can move what was in unit C, 5G out of there, really simply. But he stated, he said they have every known species of animal, insect, everything in essence preserved, okay? And you've got to ask yourself, and you know this, Jurassic Park, when Michael Crichton wrote the book Jurassic Park, the whole thing was finding extractable DNA from the dinosaurs and bringing them back and reanimating them. Well, the point that of all this discussion is, why did the head of the Smithsonian set up a club for the most elite thinkers, scientists, philosophers, and it was set up under his watch during his time at the Smithsonian? At the same time, Nubar Pasha, the prime minister of Egypt, is saying, hey, get rid of all the evidence. Well, that would really wreck eminent domain and other things if you knew that the Egyptians were in the Grand Canyon, the famous Kincaid expedition. Again, they actually have found Apaches that have had Egyptian DNA, and I'm not talking because some guy who was an Indian in 1890 went to Egypt and married an Egyptian. We're talking about multi-generational DNA, chasing back or changing back to the Egyptians.
Let me ask you, what did Pasha, this prime minister, did he actually identify some remains that had been found and somehow published that he learned about it, that were from the Grand Canyon and had seen photos, or did he go?
My understanding to answer your question is there was back and forth between the Smithsonian and between the U.S. government and the Egyptian government. By the way, most people would find this fascinating. What's underneath the Pyramid of Giza, it's not what you see on the surface. Here's something I want all your listeners to recognize. No matter what they find or talk about on the surface, it's always what's underneath where the real action is, okay? It's true in Baalbek. You had Persepolis. You have those giant stones shown to the pregnant women. When my team was down in Tiwanaku, in Bolivia, in the Altiplano, in that part of South America, I mean, the rumor was that the Bolivians had found an entire underground civilization in the area of interest, actually in the specific area of Tiwanaku, and they said, my head writer-director guy, Tim Alberino, said, Steve, they had their machine guns out, and they would not allow us to go where tourists normally would even go. So, and then I check with sources. One nice thing about being in your position too, Cliff, a lot of people that listen to you, they call you, they tell you stuff, and then what you do, I mean, most people on talk radio have to do it, is you got to see if you can get 2 or 3 witnesses that don't know each other that can validate the same point.
Yeah.
So think about what we're talking about right now. The greatest cover-up in history, the greatest cover-over of history, the revelation that's coming forth, and we don't have time to go there on Antarctica and Mars. I'll give it real. People have got to understand something. Antarctica is a big deal, and I wrote the book called Empire Beneath the Ice, How the Nazis Won World War III. For your listeners that need an overview to understand the importance of this, please go to my website, stevequayle.com, QUAYLE.com. If there's any book, and by the way, it's the best-selling book I've ever written, and it's worldwide now, because people know when the leadership of the religious world and the political world are going to Antarctica and meeting, and then they're coming back with stupid stories. They did a penguin study, and you're talking about a civilization that has existed under the ice. And now you're seeing and hearing that Mars may have microbial life in the tunnel and lava tubes of Mars proper. And know this, that they've always talked about in Lake Vostok, V-O-S-T-O-K, probably being its own unique environment. Here's where this is going to go. There's going to be an announcement at some time in the very near future, and it's going to be disclosure. It's going to be those slow disclosure. They're going to talk about it, and it's going to be Prometheus on steroids, okay? So I want people to know this. It's very critical that they get that book that I wrote, Empire Beneath the Ice, because even the flying saucers, the technology, Dr. Werner von Braun, Hermann Oberth, and this is all related to what we're talking about today, the 2 most famous rocketeers in the world claim there's 2 types of technology, ours that we engineered from theirs, ours that we built upon, and that which was totally extra, if you will, extra galactic to ours. So I go in with all the different flying saucer designs. But in Lost, I know this, unearthing the world of, unearthing Okay, the lost world of the Cloud Eaters, it all comes back to giants. It all comes back to, we've done our homework, you've read the book, and my part is on the pre-Adamic, my part is on the civilization of angels. I think I wrote, 221 pages, something like that. I talk about CERN, I talk about the reality, I talk about the giants, and torn universe. Look, CERN is absolutely going to be very, very disturbing. Right now, people don't even care. They have no concern for it all. Couldn't resist the pun.
Right.
Very soon, it's going to concern us all.
I want to get into that a little bit. I want to go. Can you spend a little more time with me here?
Sure. I'll spend as long as you want.
Well, I'm going to go a little bit longer than normal because I want to touch on about 3 other things, and that is 1, Stargates, 2, Mars, 3, CERN. Those are the 3 topics I want to go into in the time we have remaining. So let's start with the first area, which is we touched upon the fact that the ancients understood Earth's natural geomagnetic, which is the lifeblood, this energy, this telluric fields that bubble up off the ground. And you have a tremendous amount of information regarding stargates. Now, it's your belief, and you write about this, that the ancients built stargates in places like Stonehenge, Peru, Bolivia, and actually you even say Göbekli Tepe. Talk a little bit about what they would use that for, and that's supreme engineering. That is supreme. What our previous host or guest.
I think. What you're trying to say is that that's, and let's just call it this. We call it FAT, fallen angel technology. Okay. Because it's and I'm just helping you out there, because when you deal with every single Mohenjo-Daro, all of the most exotic, still being discovered locations beyond the ley lines, there always are spirals. And in Native American Desert Southwest, in Turkey, at a place called Nemrat Dagh, D-A-G-H, where it doesn't matter, I guess, Cliff, where you go, wherever you see spirals and petroglyphs, stone glyphs, or stone paintings, that denoted the place of a stargate. A stargate is just a fancy word for basically a portal. And a portal can exist between universes. You draw a dot on a piece of paper. On the other side of the paper, you fold the paper together, and that's how close it is. Some people call them wormholes. But the point being is that the natives understood these things existed. Now, I don't think people understand what I said, because we may have covered it too fast. We met with the Native American elders that meet with other Native American elders and physically open up the stargates. And the giants have stated, okay, and if you get our movie, The Holocaust of Giants, $24.95 on Vimeo, it's that important. It is it's not just important, quote, by the way, we fund our productions with the sale of DVDs. That's how we make the quality movie we did. Have you seen those yet, by any chance?
I haven't had a chance to. No, I would love.
Okay.
I'd love to see them. If you want to send me a sample of each, I'll be happy to put it up on my Facebook, like an introduction to one of your.
Oh yeah, I'd love to do that.
Yeah.
And people can go on True Legends, plural, the series.com, and they can download it on Vimeo. And I keep using the word download it. They can stream it in Vimeo. Right. And the Holocaust of Giants, everything you and I are talking about today, and the stuff that, by the way, this will be an introduction. We could probably go all night and day and just try and cover it. But the idea of stargates is they're transport points. They always existed around pyramids. The contemporary finding, they've even found one of the, if you will, capstones for one of the pyramids. And the idea is simply this, that when the head of the skunk works, called the father of stealth technology, Ben Rich for Lockheed Martin, made the statement that people were asking him, well, how do you propel spacecraft to go from our universe to other places? By the way, this was in the late 70s, and he said, how does ESP work? And they said, well, it's two thoughts simultaneously occurring at the same time. He said, and that's how it works. So, and I know people need to look that up. Ben Rich. You've heard that before, correct, Cliff?
I haven't heard of Ben Rich. Is he an engineer?
Yeah, well, he was the head of Skunkworks. Skunkworks is basically the secret space development program and aircraft development program of the U.S. government under Lockheed Martin.
Okay, yeah.
He's the father of stealth technology. But anyway, so the idea is there is a technological understanding of how stargates work. Stargates are one of the most carefully guarded secrets in the world. Obviously, even to this point, the equivalent of CERN that's being built in Jordan, which is in the Middle East, they use the term sesame, and that's an acronym, and basically it has to do with particle accelerator. But do you remember the series 1001 Arabian Nights?
Oh, of course, yeah.
Yeah, well, if you remember that the gate was opened, and the control of the genie was opened by saying "Open Sesame." Remember? And I'd encourage your listeners to go and look that up. So stargates are a fact already. Have you ever interviewed? You might want to interview him, Dr. Basiago. If I told you that there are stargates on Mars that the U.S. military has had and uses, it'd be hard for you to believe. I mean, I know it is. This stuff just...
That's my next move, is that, unfortunately, his untimely death, David Flynn describes and actually shows us that the word Cairo in Old Arabic means city of Mars, and you actually highlight that in your book.
Yes.
And we've had numerous authors talking about ancient Mars and its connection to Earth. And this is what I want to talk to you next about is, it looks like Mars had a thriving civilization. We don't know if it was 1 million years ago. If you talk with Dr. Brandenburg, John Brandenburg, he would say it's 1 million years ago. That's when they built the various pyramids. If you talk to Hoagland, he'd say it's closer to 50,000 years ago. It's hard to say, but we do know that at one time they had a thriving civilization, and in some respects, there is some kind of evidence. It might be stronger than we suspect. We don't know because we can't see what's on the surface because it's covered up. But there's pyramids. There's evidence of an actual sphinx on Mars, and those were the early pre-dynastic Egyptians who came to Earth and settled a lot of the areas. I personally believe that, and I'm interested to hear what you have to say about that.
Well, I do too. And by the way, I've just written I'm writing a forward. I will send it to you after this show. But my whole basis is this: that Mars was the planet of the fallen angels, along with the planet Rahab. When you deal with Bode's law states that every planet is the mathematical, equivalent in distance away from each preceding planet. So the asteroid belt was the planet Rahab, R-A-H-A-B, that was destroyed. And when you look at the Grand Canyon of Mars and the Grand Canyon on Earth, first of all, Mars had erratic orbits that even in 700 BC, some of the Greek philosophers, they called Mars different names like Ares and Phobos and Deimos, steeds, but they claimed they could see the volcano Mars called Olympus Mons going off with the naked eye. Now, what's interesting, the guys that are making this claim are not basically guys that sat around going into a time machine, going and watching Twilight episodes and going back to ancient Greece writing their stuff. The idea is simply that the erratic orbits and the new erratic orbits that we're going to begin to see are going to change the way we look. Mars and Earth are about 98.6% almost identical in their rate of spin, their axial spin, and also their tilt of their axis. And it's kind of interesting because when you're dealing with the twin planets, you're dealing also with, you've got a Grand Canyon on Mars, which, by the way, is the largest canyon in our solar system, 5 miles deep and, 2,500 miles long. But imagine if Mars were ever close enough to the Earth, and that part of Mars, the equatorial positioning of that and feature on Mars was offset against the identical place on Earth, then you would have a plasma discharge, and that plasma discharge is actually accounted for in the physics term called Roche's limit, R-O-C-H-E's limit. So I'm coming out with, and I'm telling you what, it's going to be a mind blower. We're coming out with a book, Mars Earth Wars, and the first 50 pages I deal with all this stuff. It's really tough, and I apologize, Cliff. It's just so tough to hit one point, and it's that I don't want to just veer from you. I want to incorporate it all.
Yeah, give me your perspective. I mean, here we have Hoagland, the ruins, the Monuments of Mars, a famous book he wrote. Well, I should say infamous because it caused him a heap of trouble. But he wrote this book based on work from Mark Carlotto. We've had Dr. Carlotto on our show. We've had a number of scientists who actually worked with Hoagland when this first film came back from the satellite. What is your contention? These ruins are
My contention is the same as I'd say Hoagland's very much closer to my time frame. I'll even go one further than that. I believe that you can trace the civilization of Mars actual being a viable living civilization to, probably 10 to 15 to 20,000 years ago, not 50. And I base that because not only does Mars mean, Cairo mean city of Mars, it also can be, when you go to the, derivation of the word, it can literally mean Mars encampment. Okay? In other words, that was the place that the Martians came. Now, why this is critical, I maintain that there is still a civilization on Mars underground. I maintain that just as the Grand Canyon, this will be mind-blowing to your listeners, on Earth, and the Egyptians were there, that deep in the, if you will, Valley Marineris, the deep valley, the Egyptian or the Martian equivalent of the Grand Canyon, there's civilization still there. I maintain we've made deals, and I maintain that the whole reason for keeping this stuff hidden is to bring it about when the New World Order wants to basically make war on the God of Heaven and claim, see, the Martians have been here all along, and they really created us.
That's pretty heavy. That's pretty heavy stuff.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
That's amazing. We're going to have you on again, Steve. Let's get into this. The Large Hadron Collider, LHC, which is in your belief is it's the 21st century Stargate, and you just hit upon it, the CERN. You say some disturbing things in the latter part of your portion of the book, and that is you believe. And I want you to talk about how you believe this, that there is this Stargate and there's an exchange of information. We don't know if it's information through codes, through decipherments of language or whatever, but it's your belief, and this thing sounds horrifically powerful, changing Earth's atmosphere, and it's like a could go out of control and cause a lot of problems. But talk about CERN and talk about your belief that it is a new Stargate.
Well, I think it's not only a new Stargate, but let's call it almost, if you will, a star tunnel. The reports coming out, even, I don't know if you watched the fake sacrifice that was supposed to have taken place with CERN, a human sacrifice, and then they claimed it was fake, but there are people claiming it was real. The patron demon of CERN is Shiva. Shiva's interesting, and because that's the Hindu god with all the arms and stuff, because that's the god, little g, of cosmic destruction and recreation, okay? And what's a concern, pun intended again, I guess, you can't even use that word without making it sound like I'm trying. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, but is that they're opening up realms of the basis of the universe. They are actually trying, and bottom line, in my opinion, to become God and have control of their destiny beyond what is ever given to mankind or even fallen angels. And it's my contention that the esoteric physics and, if you will, the secret revelations that are coming upon and out of CERN will be the very depth of mankind destruction. That's what Oppenheimer quoted. He quoted the Mahabharata when he said he had become the destroyer of worlds. And so CERN should be a concern to everyone because they're messing around and they're sending messages with the crystal plates that they have different languages written. They're trying to communicate with someone, and they're communicating with entities. And there are those people that have even contacted me who claim to work there through a third party that are talking about just how do I say this, supernaturally evil it is. Now, it's not just because I'm trying to say all technology is bad, but what I am trying to say is this, that even Nikola Tesla postulated with his geodynamic energy that it would be possible to split the Earth. Jesus made the statement, if he didn't shorten the days, there'd be no flesh left alive. So this, if you will, is a subatomic Tower of Babel that is absolutely, children shouldn't play with quantum physics not knowing the outcome of not knowing the outcome of the rules. And they don't. It's called unintended consequences. But if you're the devil, and I believe in a literal devil, the Lucifer who fell from heaven, became Satan the adversary, obviously if you hate mankind and you hate God, you're at war with him from who knows how long ago, you're going to try and do everything you can to destroy anything and everything that God created. That was why he sent the fallen angels to have sex with earth women, because Adam and Eve were created in his image and likeness, and obviously that's been corrupted when you interject, if you will, fallen angel DNA, producing a hybrid DNA. So CERN is, if you will, a weapon in the purest sense to try and interfere with the very fabric of creation, the very power of God to literally be the end of humanity. Now, they would never say that, and to some of these guys, it's just, particle physics, and they're powering it up to so many trillion electron volts and blah, 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 blah.